Hi everyone, it's Danielle with Northlawn Flower Farms. Today I want to share with you 10 tips on how to get your fresh cut flowers to last longer in the vase. And you know, when and how we harvest our flowers and making sure to avoid the buildup of bacteria in the vase will make a huge difference in the longevity of an arrangement. So let's get started with harvest time, the best practices, move our way through the process of conditioning, and then finally, once the flowers are in their final vase, what we should do. So here are those 10 tips. Tip number 1 is to cut early in the morning or in the evening when the flowers are most hydrated. Flowers cut early in the morning or in the evening don't have to deal with the harsh heat of the day and will always last longer in the vase. Tip number 2 is to always use clean buckets and clean tools when harvesting. And you know, bacteria is really the enemy of the cut flower. And so we wouldn't want to go ahead and harvest with snips that maybe just cleaned up diseased plants or with a bucket that's never been scrubbed. So take the time and the care to always scrub down your buckets and to always clean and sharpen your tools. I always like to say we should be able to drink out of our harvesting buckets and cut a steak and eat it with our snips. That's how clean we want our tools to be. Tip number 3 is to know the proper stage for the flower and foliage that you're cutting at that time. And this is quite a big topic, but it's one I would encourage you to delve into because it's really fun to learn about each flower and when and how they want to be cut. Now, as a general rule, and there are many exceptions, we want to cut spike flowers when they're about a third open and disc flowers just as they're cracking open. But as I say, and please do remember, there are many, many exceptions to this rule. Take, for instance, the zinnia. It wants to be cut very mature. It wants to have a nice stiff head when you shake it and it's fully open. And take the dahlia. It really doesn't open much more in the vase. But then take a sunflower here. I want to get it just like this as it's cracking open. So each flower really requires something different. And so I'm going to put some handy links in the description to harvesting guides so that you can quickly just look up a flower and see how and when to harvest it. Now, foliage is a little bit easier because there's basically a general rule, which is that the more mature the foliage, the better in terms of vase life. So we're looking for stronger stems, more leathery foliage, darker foliage, and just generally an older cut. An older cut will always last longer in the vase than an immature foliage that has just emerged. Often immature foliage will flop and it's really hard to revive it. Tip number 4 is to strip all the leaves that fall below the water line. And as leaves are put into water, they immediately start to break down, therefore creating bacteria growth in the water, which is what we don't want. So as I'm harvesting, I just like to go along and strip all the leaves as I go so that I never have to worry about that. Tip number 5 is to cut the stem at an angle. And a stem that's cut flat, like this, and then placed into a vase has 2 problems. The first problem is there's really no surface area at all for that stem to take up water. So by cutting it at an angle, we significantly increase the area that water can be absorbed into the stem. And the second problem with having it cut flat and then sitting at the base of your vase is that it can easily get clogged. So make sure when you're cutting, always cut at a 45-degree angle. Tip number 6 is to condition your flowers. And conditioning is just the process where we let our flowers sit in their original water and have a nice deep soak in a cool space. So it's ideal to condition flowers for at least 4 hours, but I always like to cut in the evening, condition them overnight, and then arrange in the morning. But whatever you do, at least give them that 4 hours to take in that nice deep soak and to rehydrate and recuperate from that initial cut. Tip number 7 is that when you're ready to arrange, recut the stem again. Once again, this just encourages that flower to take another nice long drink of water. Tip number 8 is to add flower food. And flowers need sugar to eat, acidity to help them absorb water, and a biocide to fend off bacteria. And floral food has all of these elements in it and will increase the vase life of your flowers. Tip number 9 is once you've made your arrangement, keep it in a nice, cool place away from direct sunlight. And you know, an arrangement placed on a radiator where the sun is shining on it might look beautiful in a magazine, but it's really not practical. For the longest vase life, we want to keep them in a nice, cool place where they don't have to contend with any extreme heat or the sun's rays beating down on them. This will significantly increase their vase life by keeping them in a cool place away from direct sunlight. And lastly, tip number 10 is to change the water as needed in order to keep the water fresh and clear. And this is going to vary depending on what kind of flowers you've used in your arrangement, how often you'll need to change it. But what we're going for here is for the water to always be fresh and clean. And if you're just working in a clear vessel where you haven't used any mechanics, it's very easy to just lift the whole arrangement up, dump the water, wash the vase thoroughly, refill with water, recut the stems, and put them back in. And then you're done. But say you're working with a more elaborate arrangement where you've used something like a floral frog or chicken wire, where you can't really take your arrangement out of the vessel. I like to do something called flushing the vessel. This is where we're going to take our arrangement and put it under running water, and we're actually going to just let the water run into the vessel continuously. And what's going to happen is it's going to push out the old water while at the same time adding in new, fresh, clean water. So that's how you deal with adding new water into an arrangement where you're using a frog. Well, there's my 10 tips on how to get the longest vase life out of your fresh cut flowers. I sure hope these tips were helpful, and until next time, happy gardening. Bye!